All right. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And thanks so much for joining us wherever you're watching from. If you are enjoying the show or taking a look at today's show, you'll know that we do have a treat for you all. We will be looking back on the cult classic known as Reindeer Games, directed by John Frankenheimer. The film sees ex-convict Rudy Duncan, played by Ben Affleck, assume the identity of his dead cellmate, and in doing so, not only gets himself involved with the said cellmate's girlfriend, played by Charlize Theron, but also finds himself dragged into a plot to heist the casino. Released in February of 2000, the film has entered a cult status thanks to its holiday setting, as well as its many plot twists as the story unfolds. As I look back on this film, I will not be alone in reflecting on its legacy, as I have a good friend of mine joining the show to look back on this film. Today's guest is an actor whose versatility, as well as his talent, have allowed him to carve out an impressive career on the small screen. Whether it's Sons of Anarchy, Vikings, and Gotham, to the big screen with films such as The Tower of Steve, The Patriot, as well as Blade. However, on this day, we will be discussing his role of Pug in today's aforementioned film, as well, of course, his experiences shooting it. It is my pleasure to welcome back onto the show Mr. Donal Logue. Let me bring him on now. Donald, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, Brandon. How are you?
Terrific. So I guess I'll start first by just diving, right into Reindeer Games. And if you could just briefly share, how that all came about, because I understand that if we're tracing back the origins of getting involved with this film, there was a schism of sorts with the prior actor involved and the director, and did you have any knowledge of that prior to, hopping onto this film, or were you kind of shielded from all of that was happening behind the scenes?
Oh, that's a good question. Brandon, and it's strange to talk about reindeer games from the perspective of someone who played such a small role, frankly, in the film. But was around the whole time. But I remember I auditioned for John Frankenheimer for the role, and I was with my friend at the time, Max Perlich, who was also auditioning for the role of Pug. And it felt like it went well, and my relationship with John seemed really cool. We were, we had a good vibe in that space, and so I left, and then I didn't hear anything about it. So that's the game. Like you give it a shot. And then you let it go. And gosh, I'm trying to think, like maybe a month or whatever after that, I was in Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and my first child was being born. And we got the call in the hospital that there was some shakeup at Reindeer Games. They're already up in Canada, and you're back on the table for Pug if you wanted. And it was a big-ish studio movie. It was a big job for me. It was like the biggest, by far, it was kind of the biggest financial job for me. I hadn't been working that much other than on really, really small indie things, and I needed it. Like, I needed this job, and it was hard because my child had just been born. It required me to go to Prince George, Canada for 10 days and then come back to LA for 2 weeks and then go to Vancouver for 6 months. I just had to get through that 10 days. That stuff that you see on that picture with us out in the snowy fields and the exteriors and the stuff we did up in Prince George, which is really kind of northern central British Columbia as you get towards the lower part of Alaska. And from my perspective, it was just I remember it being a tough time because I had a baby, and I had my kid's mom flown out. My sisters were up there taking care of it. It was all cool, but it just felt so odd. Um, and then Danny Trejo took me under his wing, and I had met Danny maybe 8 years prior, and I knew who he was at that point, and we exchanged a few words, but I was spinning. I remember going to this church because I just wanted to get centered about what was going on in my life and what was doing. And I met Danny there, and uh, we just fell in with each other, and it's been that way ever since 1999. It was a tough shoot. I know that probably Charlize. There are some people who've had a bit to say about the experience on Reindeer Games. Um, I Yeah, I don't know. It felt frenetic. It felt intense. Um, but I love those people, Gary and Charlize, and of course, Danny, and that was kind of our group. And John Frankenheimer, he was old school. He was an old school legend. He's cut from a different cloth. He used to do Playhouse 90, or he'd do live theater on TV. He was friends with Max Schmeling. It was his car that was parked in the limo. His car parked outside in the alleyway behind the theater where RFK was shot, waiting for RFK to come out after his speech. Like he found himself, his threads kind of wove through a lot of fascinating American political and cultural history in the 20th century. He had fallen down in the business. He had come back with Ronin, and now he was. I felt really lucky to have met John. I felt really lucky to have met John. After the Dow of Steve, after the Patriot, I went to go do the Dow of Steve, which was a tiny indie feature, but for which I got to really act and got a Sundance Prize for acting. And like with a role like Pug, you're just standing there trying to be in the moment. You're not adding much, but you're not detracting at all. You're just trying to find your place in this milieu. But I remember after the Dow of Steve and Sundance, I came home, and there was my doorbell rang, and I went, and it was an old school Western Union telegram guy, and he handed me a telegram, and it was this telegram of awesome congratulations from John Frankenheimer. And I thought, what an old school gent. And not long after that, he went in for an operation that I think was just fairly routine and exploratory, but then he passed away, and so we lost a legend. And if people watching this want to watch The Manchurian Candidate or Grand Prix or Ronin, or to get a sense of the dynamic stuff this man can do, I don't think there's ever been a director that's directed thrilling car stuff better than John Frankenheimer. But I thank God for Reindeer Games. And sometimes you do things in life because you're supposed to meet somebody who's going to play perhaps the most significant role in your life. And for me, that was Danny Trejo. And we became best friends, and who'd have thunk it? But, a couple of years ago, Danny and I wrote his memoir, got to tell his life story, his story
Right.
of redemption and hope to the world.
Yeah.
And he was like, whoever thought that kid sitting behind a counter when I was a janitor in 1991, when I met him first, who was going to be the person who helped me get my story to the world. So I think that's how the world works. I haven't seen reindeer games in a long time. It was interesting because when Aaron Kruger, who's the writer, showed up at set, I was like, "Oh, Aaron, what have you done before?" And he said, I'm doing this other thing, but it's very different. It's kind of intense thriller called Arlington Road. And he said to me, if I hope I don't misremember, it's not a comedy like this. And I'd been there for months, and I was like, is this is this supposed to be comedic? Like, what's going on? But yeah. I mean, I enjoy the fact it's got cult. I enjoy the fact it's got cult status now. I haven't seen Charlize or Danny. I always keep in touch with Gary Sinise. I keep in touch with. Unfortunately, Clarence Williams III passed away.
Right.
God bless him. And yeah, I met Ashton Kutcher on his first day on a movie set.
Yeah.
And it,
For sure. And I guess what I'll ask next is, and you touched on it just now, but I feel like it's worth mentioning is in looking at the film and recently revisiting the film myself. I noticed that while the ensemble element exists, of course, in that film, with these runners, there are a lot of moments in which there are duos where folks are paired off as duos, and you have scene partners. So people who don't act are not privy to how tricky that could be, because it is a very fine art to be able to effectively do a scene between two people, because as you will know, there's so many things that go into play, and while it can be exciting, it can also be daunting too, because while you and your scene partner may have different approaches to how you approach your acting, there may be different energies that you guys bring respectively. So, in speaking to those moments that you had where you were provided the opportunity to pair off with different co-stars over the course of that film, could you share, what that was like, whether it was with Theron, whether it was with Affleck, whether it was with, Trejo, what it was like, the approaches that they had, and obviously, they each have their different styles. So, if you could share, what that was like, from what you recall in working with them individually in that way.
I was honestly just part of. It felt like I was really just part of the broader ensemble, almost the whole time. It was always to the group. If I had whatever few things I had to say, it was in the presence. I'm like, man, maybe it's not the guy. The guy's about. It was always in the presence of everybody of the group. Or if we're in the back of the 18-wheeler and we're beating up Ben and threatening him, it's with the guys. But like, if we wanted to slip into what you were talking about, which was a phenomenal point that you're making, Brandon, about energy and scene partners. Like, the one thing I think, generally speaking, actors are really good at is creating a safe and warm space between each other, getting to know each other very quickly, because you don't want to feel like you're hanging out there, or it's awkward, or you're being judged in the middle of a performance or a scene, or that I remember on Vikings, a reporter asked me if the actors on set had to hate each other or act like enemies to get that to come across on the scenes. And I was like, it's absolutely the opposite. Like, the closer friend you can be with someone that you're playing some antagonistic role towards, that's how you get to where you're going. That's how you get to where you're going. That being said, I felt like in some elements, because it was a really difficult shoot, I remember, for instance, the last day in Port Prince George of exteriors, they had to do 72 setups to make the day. the whole company was leaving town after that, so it had to be done. And there was a lot of tension and a lot of screaming, and I was just trying to just hold my space, keep my head down. And there was a scene where Ben escapes from us and we have to chase him over snowy hillsides, etc. And we did a take, it didn't work, and they had to physically brush the entire side of this snowy hillside to make it work for the last shot. The sun is setting, the ADs are screaming, everyone's freaking out, and I'm perched on this spot waiting for action so that we can go tumbling down the hill.
Yeah.
And as they were calling rolling and before the cameras actually rolled, I was perched and I fell. I pitched forward. And I knew it right in that I knew in my mind, I was like, I have ruined this take. I'm going to get the ire of John Frankenheimer and everybody here, everybody that's working so hard. I am the GOAT, not the GOAT, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm saying. Not the GOAT in terms of great, like I am the GOAT that they want to kick.
Yeah.
And halfway, like as I was falling forward down this steep embankment, I just felt boom. I just felt something grab my back. And it was bizarre because Danny was crouching behind me and my weight, and I was big. I'm big at the, 200-pound guy, like falling forward. And Danny had me completely held, like I was aloft almost in the air. And he gently brought me right back to my position.
Wow.
And he whispered in my ear, he's like, I told you I got your back, Holmes. And then rolling and action. And those are the moments, those are the inside moments on reindeer games that to me really, really stand out. I'll say the crew was incredible. When you see these things, like he's running across a snowy field and he has to fall through the ice into water, like how these people have completely built and created a kind of pool system underneath in the snowy fields to make this, to make this kind of those tricks and stunts work. And big group of people. And yeah, it was really awesome. But when I think about things, generally speaking, I think about where I was at in life. I think about my son, Finn, being a few weeks old. I went back to LA, then we came back up to Vancouver, and I remember on the news, it was the day of the Columbine shooting, which was stunning. And then I remember having this little bitty baby in Vancouver with his mom and our dog and going to the park and working hard and hanging with these people. I really, Ben Affleck is, Ben's generous and he's super, super funny and very smart. And I enjoyed getting to spend time around Ben and his stunt double, Tom McComas, who I love, wild man. They went jogging one morning because he had rented a house somewhere more in the suburbs. And they saw in front of this house, there was this little beautiful wooden toy kid airplane thing for a tiny kid. And it had a, $10 for sale sign on it or something. And so they bought it and they carried it with them on their run. And then they gave it to me. And I remember driving back to Vancouver with the little propeller going in this wooden airplane on my roof. And I remember funny things. I remember Gary Sinise always in the makeup trailer playing these outtakes of, oh my gosh, why am I spacing on his name? Orson Welles. Orson Welles doing voiceover commercials in England for frozen peas, frozen beef patties, and it's like him losing his mind. And we would listen to these every day in the makeup trailer, and the absurdity of it was great. And and at the time, Ben had an assistant named Lauren, and Gary's assistant was named Peter Friedlander, and they were the nicest. They were just so fun to be around and cool. And after that, Peter went on, and like when I clocked him again, he's like, I don't know, like the number 2 or 3 person at Netflix. Um, Super nice guy. Nice guys finish first. Yeah. So that was an intense year, I'll tell you, because I had a baby, which is insane, trying to raise them in kind of little extended stay hotels, a dog, um, the difficulty for my kid's mom. We left Vancouver and we went to Santa Fe for the Dow of Steve. And then when the Dow of Steve was over, we went to Rock Hill, South Carolina for the Patriot. And that was a busy year, and that was an amazing, but if I think about movie experiences that are probably more um, interesting to dig into from the perspective of film, it will definitely be those two for me, because the Dow of Steve, I was in every scene and I had to really, it was like first time really carrying a film. And then
I feel like that's a great segue, though, Don. Is that just that idea, just as you said, of leading a film, and I know you will probably still be very very humble about this, but as I'm talking about the scene partner component and diving into the next topic, is you're one of the few actors that I know that, whether you're leading the film or whether you're providing support as a co-star, in either case, when you are providing an opportunity to do those scenes where you are there with the lead or with whoever, when you're providing an opportunity to act opposite of someone in those intimate, like, dual scenes, or if it's even if other people are in the room and it's just between you and another character. Give you another example: Blade, of course, I mention this all the time. Or even in talking about the Patriot, those scenes are electric, and it's not an easy task to do. So kudos. But in getting into what you were just talking about just now, of being of what it takes to be a lead, and I feel like not enough attention is paid to that. Sets, as you will know, are only as good as the leads that you have in that said project, and the tone that they set. So for a film like Reindeer Games, where I'm assuming it was Affleck and Sinise that were kind of leading the way, or outside of John. Sorry, go ahead.
and but you're entirely right. But I have to say, man, I've never really worked with someone who didn't end up being pretty generous about being in a scene. Um, and I'll say this: the few times I have with people, I think they weren't the big lead. They were people who were smaller parts, and were the moment was overwhelming to them. And what you try to do in that situation is be as loving and kind to them as possible, to invite them to get to a point where you're like, it's just you and me talking. Forget the whole crew, forget the yelling producers, forget the cameras. Let's just do this thing and play. And I was talking to this young actor last night on this gig we're doing here in West Virginia, and he's amazing. He's so good. And he was like, my take on this, all you want to do in a scene is listen and service the person you're in the scene with. And then the scene will take off. And it takes so much pressure off of the ego to feel like you have to carry everything, or you have to be the one that drives everything with all the energy. And sometimes that's the case. Everything requires something different, like a comedy I did like Knights of Prosperity requires big kind of frenetic energy, and then Sons of Anarchy or something requires something different and more internal. Or but you get the sense of that. But I was really lucky. I love, I made a lot of friends in working with all the people I've worked with. And not because I'm like a great guy or whatever, but there were so many amazing so many good people. I think people don't hear that much, or they don't want to think about that, you know. I think there may have been days in the old days where there was that classic diva thing or whatever. But even then, I excuse people in some ways because, like, when you leave work and you go home, and then there's 8 pages of something that you have to memorize word for word and match it to emotion and movement or something. It's a big thing. It's really hard. Like, before I started doing this 40 something years ago, it seemed impossible. It took a muscle, it took a lot of work. And it's impressive to me, like when I watch Tar, and I'm like, how does she do it with the dialect and the alacrity and the intelligence behind it and the understanding. And when you have to show up to work and you have that on your shoulders and you're about to do what amounts to the big speech in front of your 7th grade class, that's scary because you don't want to look foolish or dumb, or you want to invest in it, but sometimes you're embarrassed to invest too much. And we're as humans, we're afraid of public humiliation and falling down in front of somebody else. And sometimes that, I think a little bit of that prickly behavior comes only from fear, that they're carrying some kind of fear or anxiety about not being good enough or doing it. So, yeah, I know I'm veering into some funky topics, but I like
No,
this
no,
because
no.
I know you go there. Like, I know you think that way. I know that about you. That's kind of what the hit I got off you when we first met. And I don't do these really often at all, but you're different, and I appreciate it.
I well, I appreciate you, Don. I guess what I'll say is, from what I gather from what you shared, is just that idea of being open and being inviting. Would be qualities that perhaps you've observed from your leads, and when you have been, in a supporting role, that you have taken, with you when you have been placed in that said position. Am I right to assume that, or have there been other qualities as well?
That's 100% right. I mean, first of all, I think everybody kind of figures out as everybody figures out in elementary school and junior high school and high school and beyond how to behave in a certain way to fit into like, to survive socially in these different environments that aren't always the greatest. And you just learn that you're either like, if you either think of other people or people kind of don't. So it wasn't like, oh my God, all those lessons of be nice to people on the way up because you'll see them on the way, all those things is, you know things in life already. But it's true. One of my first jobs, well, sneakers, well, okay, Common Ground was my first job, and Jane Curtin was amazing and kind of motherly and awesome to all of us. And then a movie called Darrow with Kevin Spacey about Clarence Darrow, and I was kind of part of a crew of cool New York actors who were out there in Washington, Pennsylvania, to film this, not far from where I am now. And I felt kind of accepted. And then Sneakers, and the only person I really interacted with besides the table read was Redford at the big speech, and Mary McDonnell, who were incredibly kind and supportive. But I did a guest star on the Commish, the show with Michael Chiklis, and I was just the kid being the guest of the week kind of guy. And he was so cool. He was so cool to the crew. He was so cool to the guest stars, which is huge, that it reminded me that if I'm in a situation like that with my own show, like Grounded for Life or Terriers, or even Gotham, where it was an ensemble, but anyone who comes in as a guest, like star, just make them feel super welcome and part of the family and part of the team. And that's something that I hope I've done, and that's something that's always been done to me.
Gotcha. So I guess one thing that you teased a little earlier was the idea of legacy, right? And in thinking of this film, and congratulations, by the way, because I know the topic today, of course, is Reindeer Games, but you had two other films that also are hitting 25 years, which is The Patriot, and as you mentioned, and The Tao of Steve. So, but in speaking of legacy, so many, and this is just a question to those that seek to be actors. A lot of times in actors' wildest dreams, they would like to have a legacy or have a body of work that's appreciated, right? And when you've been a part of projects where that has been the case from the very beginning. As soon as the film gets released, it's widely accepted. It's people enjoy it, and then it continues to have a life after that. And then sometimes that may not be the case, where maybe it just didn't come out at the right time. It came in and out in a different time, and it gains appreciation later. So, in speaking to that, and having that, because I guess you can never know, what would you say to actors that would want to have that body of work, right? But they have to have that trust of those said projects that they involve themselves with.
Um, Good point. I I think it's pretty obvious in life that we don't control as much as we think we do. Um, Big journeys, things are happening, and so what you try to do is do the best you can with what's right, literally in front of you, and hope for the best. And if you think about, like, and all of us think about that, like, oh man, if this happens, oh, this is gonna, I mean, I've heard so many projects spoken of, like, this is gonna be huge, and it never made it past the pilot stage, or some big movies that never even were released. One that I thought was like going to change my life, and so you just got to move. You got to move forward. In that, you have to hopefully have some range and a little skill. You want to be able to. When I first got to Los Angeles, because it was a different era, some guy was like, "Are you want to do film or television? You want to do comedy or drama?" And I was like, can you do all of it? And he's like, no. And the reality is you can, especially now it's changing. And I look to guys like Bryan Cranston and Michael Chiklis and a lot of other people who helped change the way people thought about, um, you know, not being defined by a character or a role. And there's one thing I'll say, Brandon, is there's so many good actors. Like, if you audition for something, and when I was on the producing side of things, when you sit on the other side of the table and 25 people come in for a role, and they're all just really good, and they offer different choices, and at some point 24 are going to walk away and go, what did I do wrong? And it was, they did nothing wrong. But as an actor, you have to understand that there's just a lot of good people. They're really good. And I don't know, I don't know if it helps or hurts sometimes as you go forward in your career and there's a little bit more recognizability. I really feel like I've kept a super low profile, as much as I can outside of just showing up for work. And I feel like it helps, right? Because you want to come into every part and be as anonymous as possible to have people believe that you're something. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. As a young actor, I would say, first of all, do it. Like, you got to do stage, you got to do scenes, you got to get up, you got to try and learn how to memorize pages of things at a go without holding it in your hand. You can't just look in a mirror and think you're cool. You can't think about what you look like from the outside. You can't think about acting in terms of maybe I'll turn this way and my eyebrow will go up, or, oh God, my hands feel weird. If you got to get it here, like you got to get it here, just like when you're in a huge argument with somebody and there's no thought of breath, or you don't worry about where your hands are and you're planted, and like somehow you have to take something that's been written and make it as believable and that and breathable and livable and flowy as that kind of thing. And the way you do that, just like sports, is the more you do it, the better you get at it. You can have the right shoes, you can be cool, you can have a physical type, whatever, but no one knows someone who can call the LA Lakers and get you a contract in the NBA just because you think, and I don't think people think of themselves in that terms, but they do sometimes think about it in this business as if it's just and the reality is, if they haven't worked their way up or spent time or then had days on sets where they have to come in for a line and hit a mark and get a light and be nervous about the crew. Like that's all stuff you start working through and get more and more comfortable with it. But now that being said, some people are phenomenally, like a lot of times, like kids who turned in insane performances because they're so pure about like, okay, I'm just pretending to be this person. I'm gonna pretend really hard, which is the focus and the energy, and they've got that, and yeah, it's a wild thing. It's fun to talk about the approach to craft or whatever. You kind of really can't anymore because, and I don't blame people, but I think the whole business, acting, whatever it is, it has a kind of bad. It's almost like a pejorative term now. But among people who do what we do, who decided to be part of the circus or the theater world or whatever, just because in high school, when you perform your first monologue or do a play or something, it's so thrilling and it's so fun to meet people and the nerves and to go out there and just see it pull off and, pull it off. Or that's kind of what drew me in and kept me in.
Got it. So I guess let me see. I'm gonna put it in the.
Oh, sorry, Brandon, my phone died.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Put you in the chat.
Technical issues.
Yes, technical issues, guys. Give me 1 second.
So I apologize to your.
You're fine. Too. You're okay. You're okay.
I'm really bad about technology.
So yeah, so I guess what I'll ask next, Don, is typically with these anniversary shows, one thing that we like to do to kind of close it off is, in reflecting, we just talked about legacy, but in reflecting on it, all these years later, perhaps something that you're most proud of when thinking of this film. And I know you talked about it before, but maybe it's something, very singular that comes to mind for you, in talking about the thing that you're most proud of, and maybe in retro, and conversely, I should say, what you wish you could have done differently. It may not necessarily be a regret, but maybe in hindsight of things that now that maybe you had an opportunity to do when you were in that moment, and when thinking about Reindeer Games.
I hate being this kind of guest guy, whatever, but like, honestly, I just really had I just really was kind of a background guy, given some energy and some looks and standing and, just trying to, like, whenever my, compared to the jobs I've done where it was just full on. And so to me, the proudest thing was, my kid was, it was the first 6 months of his life. And I had nighttime duty, whether I was working like these 14-hour days, and it was spending time with him at 2 or 4 in the morning. He was a formula kid, so I could feed him and burp him and pray. I was like, Finn, please go to sleep. But it was that combination of taking care of the most important stuff to take care of in life and working. And I don't know if that's like that kind of answer, but you know, there were some fun things about reindeer games in the sense that there were some fun shoot 'em ups that were, that are stressful because it's like you're blowing up the inside of a casino, and the way that they put all the pre-explosive rigging, you have to be so precise or you're costing these people 7 hours or whatever. Meeting the people who would filter in, like Dennis Farina or Ashton Kutcher, and I think I've gotten to die, I think 3 times in my film career in a Santa Claus suit. I've been blown away somehow.
And you've had awesome deaths. I was gonna say you've had some memorable deaths, and they are up there. Well, whether
I'm just catching up with Danny Trejo.
But what about maybe things, or maybe you don't. I was gonna say things that in hindsight, you wish you had opportunity to do. I mean, I know you were just commenting on the director. Unfortunately, passed away not too long after doing this film, and you talked about how awesome he was in terms of the anecdote that you gave about the way he sent from Western Union. So. Or were there any things like that where, like in hindsight, of course you don't know, you never really know, but that you perhaps had an opportunity to do or to say?
On the film itself, or
Yeah.
It was interesting you chose reindeer games because it would be maybe one of the most difficult ones to talk about. There was really just you show up, and it's not in, there's no extent, there's no broad lane to be like, maybe I can try this or maybe I can try this. It wasn't that world. It was you're here, you do this. So in that regard, we did what we did in our situations, and it was kind of intense. But I honestly, I can't, because if just being dead honest, like it's a scene where I'm standing here and I'm watching what's going on and I'm making a little bit of a move, and that it felt like months of that, and then occasionally like, hey man, maybe not the guy, but to me, getting that call, and as you probably know, Vin Diesel was cast in the role, and it didn't work out creatively because, in fairness to Vin Diesel, when he was up there, he saw what that role was going to be, and he was on this trajectory, and he needed to do something at that time in his career where he carried the ball and he had his physicality and is kind of in the quasi superhero-y realm or whatever. And I don't know if it was Triple X or whatever the movie he did.
Fast and Furious.
Was that during Reindeer Games?
Yep, the first Fast and Furious. So, things happen for a reason.
Things happen for the biggest reason, right? For him. For me, I got to see Danny. I got to be in one place for a while as my little baby was growing. And I'm so sorry to keep bringing it back to the human, like, life stuff, because it would be embarrassing to sit here and go, and I remember the scene in Reindeer Games where Pug, it's like, Pug's just the dude standing back there. He's just kind of the dimwit. And, so yeah, I just remember, I love Vancouver too. I love British Columbia, and I love Vancouver. It's so beautiful. And there's this thing called Stanley Park, which was near where we lived. And I'll never, I'll never forget that kind of thing, being hiking through this park with a baby thing on, one of those little carriages on my back, and my kid and our dog Lulu, who passed away. And that's the stuff of life. And sometimes in this business, it can be really costly because you have to go away for a long time. Like right now, I'm in West Virginia. It's not too long for this little commitment, but and it's fun, and I met amazing people, and I feel like I've known them for a long time, and I've only been here for 3 days, and that's a gift. But yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Don, it's always a pleasure having you on. I don't know if you're able to share. I know you say you're on location now. I don't know if you're able to share. Maybe you have to be tight-lipped about what the project is.
Tight-lipped about it. I think they announced it the other day. I'm just doing. They're doing a reboot of Prison Break, the TV series, with Elgin James as the showrunner and creator and writer, and Emily Browning is the lead, and she's amazing. This kind of Australian dynamo who's had such a phenomenal career. Great young cast. I play one of the older guys, so that's what we're doing. And hopefully, yesterday was the first day of filming it. Knock on wood that it's going well for everybody. It's a really good group. It's a really good group. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Don, as I said, it's always a pleasure, to have you on. I really do appreciate you squeezing out some time. Before I let you go, can you tell folks, where they can, find you?
Oh yeah, I'm not too much on there, but I'm Donal F. Logue, DONAL F LOGUE at Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. DONAL LOGUE at. Not totally. I'm 59 years old, and I don't want to be super active on social media, but those places, you can find me. It feels like murky waters these days. It just feels like the risk versus reward, or whatever the dopamine hit that you get from it. It's just, I respect the heck out of my colleagues or people I know who just don't avoid it. I know, Brandon, for your world, because that's the new world, right? Like that's where you have to, yeah. And I'm glad that this technology can bring these little chats to broader audiences. I think you're great at this. I know you're great at moderating panels. I know you thought a lot about pop culture and cinema history and just what it takes for the artist to make the difference between directors and writers and actors, etc. And I appreciate it.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, I want to thank Don so much for hopping on for this 25th anniversary. It's crazy to believe. Getting up there in age, y'all. 25th anniversary of Reindeer Games. With that out of the way, I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you soon, guys. Bye now.